within East. All you need to do to experience the magic at OTX East Africa is simply to dial *292#, and following the prompts, you will be able to access the market and be able to also learn more about the products they have at OTX East Africa. OTX is regulated by the Capital Markets Authority and is saying you can do something new. Of course, it's another day, of course, and we get to give you what is happening on the markets here in Uganda, on, of course, the regional scene as well as the international markets. And we get you up to speed with what's really on ground in as far as the stock market trading, in as far as the treasury bond markets, and, of course, matters concerning financial markets. To be part of the show, you can go to our Twitter. That is at Smart24TV, and that is now. You can do that using Twitter. That's our handle. You can follow us and be able to get all the content coming in your way. You can also give us feedback through those various social media channels, especially those of you watching on YouTube through the comments section. Now, generally speaking, let's have a look at what really took place on the markets here in Africa on the last day of trading yesterday. Johannesburg Stock Exchange, of course, let's start off with the biggest stock exchange within Africa, a list shaded off 673.94 points from their benchmark index. On the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, we do have quite a number of listings, at least over about 421 listings, including some of the biggest financial institutions like Absa, Stanbic Holdings, and the like. Well, looking at what the day looked like, in aggregate, we had out of the 421 listings, about 365 listings trading for this particular day. And the day ended with 117 gainers and just about 215 losers. This can explain why it negatively impacted on the J203, having over 215 equities losing, almost twice the number of gainers, was actually something that hampered the performance of the benchmark index. Well, the details, according to the data we have here at Smart24 TV, B Sasol was the lead gainer at least 55% gain in price, closing the day at 155 South African rand. Now, what is B Sasol Limited? When you look at this company, it is a global integrated chemicals and energy company spanning over about 31 countries and employing close to 31,000. The company operates vertically integrated chemicals and energy company related products through its 5 segments. One of the segments they do have, of course, is mining, which is quite a big deal there in South Africa. There's exploration, there's also production, international energy, and then base chemicals as well as performance chemicals. The company operates several coal mines and upstream interests in South Africa. Now, looking at the data from this company, at least we have a market capitalization marking about 981 million South African rand, which makes the company the 250th most valuable on the South African market. The company's performance was pushed yesterday quite abruptly after the company gained 55% on their price, and that was closing off the day with 155 South African rand on the day. Now, moving on, Ellie's holdings continue to rally the market as well with a 30% gain. And when you look at the past 3 days, because today being, of course, a Wednesday, we're looking at the Monday tradings, comparing them with Tuesday, and of course, looking ahead on the Wednesday tradings. Ellie's Holdings has been also one of the top companies for Monday and Tuesday tradings and continues to be in the same lead at the moment. But will this be sustained as we move ahead? Let's watch today as we, of course, get to analyze what will be coming out of the day's trading at the end of today. Ellie's Holdings, for those of you who might not know, is an investment company and a holding company for businesses involved in the manufacture and, of course, trade and distribution of a diverse range of products and services, including DTT, satellite television, as well as other related electrical accessories products. We do have also signal distribution, residential and commercial LED lighting systems, and a couple of others. So it's a retail business for basically electrical stuff. Now, when you look at the current market capitalization of the company, it holds about 105 million South African rand, and this is coming in the 371st position. So it's not that amongst the top boys, but in the recent days, it has really put up a very good performance. Matengu Mining Company as well added at least 20% to their value, and Huge Group added about 14.17%. On the losing side in South Africa, we had African Dawn Capital coming in at the bottom with at least an end of day price depreciation of 35.29%. This is a company that lost most value on the Tuesday tradings, closing the day with 0.11 South African rand per share. Tradehold also lost 21.17%, and the Afrocentric Investment Corporation at least also lost 17.49% on their second day of trade. Moving on from South Africa, looking across the rest of the continent, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange was not the only losing, stock exchange in as far as the benchmark index is concerned. As well, looking across the West African region and South African region, Zimbabwe Stock Exchange gained 4,953 points on their benchmark index, whereas the Nigerian Stock Exchange added at least 2,640 points on their value there from the day's trading. Markets are quite a little better, generally speaking, across Africa, and South Africa really seems to be an exception for Tuesday tradings, because looking at all the benchmark performance indicators here, I can see at least generally they all moved in the positive direction. Markets are improving across Africa, first of all because of the improved market conditions, and so you can be able to, first of all, be able to trade across borders easily as far as the regions are concerned. In South Africa, in West Africa, and of course even here in East Africa, things are getting a little bit better with time. So one of the challenges that was holding back the markets was the influx of foreign investors, which saw most of the equities actually get to depend on these foreign investors. And in case of any suspicion, even the slightest suspicion of maybe losses that could be due to elections or some other influence that could be coming to influence the markets, these foreign investors would back off and get to invest in other financial markets elsewhere in the world, including the United States and in China. But of recent, due to investor education and a lot of financial literacy going around the continent, many locals have been involved in the trading within the financial markets here in Africa, and that has improved generally the face of trading on the African continent. But let's get back home in East Africa and start off with, first of all, the Uganda Securities Exchange and see how the performance was for Tuesday. Generally speaking, the all-share index shows a better performance generally, with a 2.67 points increase on the Tuesday mark. And currently, when you look at the value of the all-share index, we are counting about 1,024 points. When we talk about the all-share index, it gives you the picture of all the listings here on the Uganda Stock Exchange. We have 18 listings. 8 of these are cross listings and 10 are domestic listings. So the all-share index gives us a picture of what all the listings after the end of the day had for the say in terms of performance, in terms of gaining in price or losing, or actually in terms of market capitalization. As per the data, we have at least about in aggregate 3 equities that did trade on the exchange, and the day ended with 7 gainers and 1 loser, contributing also to the good performance. Amongst the top gainers, we did have only cross listings, with Nation Media Group coming in at the top. Nation Media Group is a media house based in Kenya and is cross-listed here on the Uganda Stock Exchange. Now, Nation Media Group yesterday added at least 10.14%, adding a total of about 492.75 Ugandan shillings. And the Jubilee Holdings Limited stock added a 0.47% and closed at 4,806 Ugandan shillings. On the other hand, Equity Bank Limited added at least about 0.46% up to a closing price of 996.30 Ugandan shillings, whereas the East African Breweries Limited stock added 0.36% up to at least a value of 3,948 Ugandan shillings. On the other hand, KCB Group added at least 0.35%, closing at 838 shillings, whereas the Centum stock added 0.19% up to 221.94. Now, why don't we see most of the listings here from the domestic stocks? A pretty simple answer is, first of all, usually the movements in price on the domestic listings are influenced by movement. And by movement, I mean by people being able to buy and sell shares. So if people are unable to buy and sell shares on the domestic listings, sometimes it's really hard to see those movements. And how do the movements occur really? Remember, this all depends on the sentiments that investors have about a company or about the markets generally speaking. For example, let's look at MTN Uganda. MTN Uganda traded yesterday 1,300 shares, and the price remains stagnant at 165. But this is despite the fact that MTN actually increased their dividend this year, and their stock price has not yet even responded to that. Because what we would expect mainly from the investors here is to get very excited and buy into MTN stock before, of course, the book closure date, so they can benefit from the dividend. But we are not seeing that currently, and that, of course, calls for probably maybe look into what the investor is looking at right now. The investor probably is no longer just looking at how much dividend is MTN giving me. They're looking at the longer term value and the competition on the market currently. When you look at Stanbic Bank Uganda, yesterday they traded at least 418,700 shares. Now, Stanbic Bank Uganda closed at a loss of 0.15%. coming off down to 25.96 Ugandan shillings per share. A slightly smaller drop. Maybe you see, usually the last trading deal marks the last price, and usually that's what we have for the opening price of the next day. And when you see these small changes, it doesn't have much influence as it would if at all it was a big, massive change. So it's quite tricky to find the fine line between the investor sentiment and the market conditions, as well as performance on the Uganda Securities Exchange. Movements could be on the contrary to what we would expect naturally from investors with what we have in the current market conditions. But moving ahead, the gainers, when you look at the movers in the market, those that traded the 3 equities were MTN Uganda at 1,300 shares and Stanbic Bank Uganda at 418,000 shares, whereas Wumeme Limited at least traded at least about 11,100 shares as well. Let's have a look at a story here on MTN that is currently trending. MTN Uganda, remember, issued a dividend of at least 5.5 shillings for every share for their financial year 2022-2023. Now, NSSF is one of the biggest investors we have in our equities here in Uganda. And yesterday, on Tuesday, we had the CEO of the company actually hand over. Actually, this was on Monday, not yesterday. On Monday, yesterday but one, we had the CEO of the MTN company, that is Miss Livia Mulinge, hand over a check of at least 31.4 billion Ugandan shillings as dividend for its 1.98 billion shares on the market. Now, MTN has paid at least 31.48 billion to the telecommunications company, and currently NSSF poses as the biggest, investor in the equity. NSSF in 2021, during MTN's initial public offer, bought a 1.98 billion shares volume. That was a huge investment worth at least about, let's say, 360 billion Ugandan shillings at the time. This is after, of course, the company, listed electronically on the Uganda Securities Exchange, and after an undersubscribed initial public offer. Now, NSSF currently is the second largest shareholder in MTN Uganda. According to, of course, Mr. Patrick Ayota, speaking during the ceremony of handing over the payment, the NSSF acting managing director, that's Mr. Patrick Ayota, mentioned and said that the earnings affirm that the fund's decision to invest in MTN, given its performance track record and market leadership, is unregrettable. He also added that MTN has very high margins and has contributed to attractive returns on invested capital. He said, noting that MTN was NSSF's first, the largest earning firm, and this is at an investment of about 14.6% to its total equity portfolio. So NSSF, in all its asset classes, we have, of course, several asset classes, including treasury bonds coming in at the top, or fixed incomes, and then we do have fixed deposits, and then the equities. 14.6% of all that has been invested in MTN Uganda, which is quite interesting. So they really do trust this stock. And this could be a point of reference, or a point of, making a decision. If you're making a decision, you really need to know who are the investors in this company. If NSSF could decide to invest 14.6% of its value that is, dedicated to equities in a single company, there should be questions why, and there should be a reason, a very good reason why. And if you find those reasons are in line with your own personal goals of investment, definitely I would say that would be something you would base on to make a decision. Now, the investment, according to Mr. Ayota Patrick, the acting managing director of NSSF, fits well with the fund's diversification strategy, a key component of the corporate strategy to grow the fund to 20 trillion by 2025. Currently, NSSF is valued at least 17 trillion on average at the moment, but the goal is to reach 20 trillion by 2025. Mr. Gerard Paul Casato, the NSSF Chief Investment Officer, said the fund's total investment in equities stands at 2 trillion and is held in at least about 30 companies across East Africa. However, he added that the fund manages assets that are worth over 17.8 trillion. That is the savings of those retirees or savings of people who are doing mandatory saving with NSSF, invested in fixed incomes, in securities, equities, and real estate assets within Africa, East Africa in particular. That's a story I wanted you to pick interest on before we move ahead with the market performances, and of course getting to know that also other shareholders, you will be receiving your dividend from MTN Uganda if you're told you are a shareholder with MTN Uganda by their book closure date. Let's move on to Nairobi and have a look at the markets as they are currently at the busiest stock exchange within East African region. Now, on Tuesday, 52 listings out of 65 participated in the trading at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, and the day ended with at least about 27 gainers and 12 losers. The day was marked with Nairobi Business Ventures' biggest gain at an 8.2% appreciation in price, closing off the day at 2.77 Kenyan shillings per share. At the moment, when you look at Olympia Capital Holdings, it came in the second position at a 7.84% appreciation, and HF Group at least added 7.13%. On the other hand, at the losing side, we had Express Kenya, unfortunately continue to come out at the bottom after an end-of-day price depreciation of 8.64%, closing off the day at 3.28 Kenyan shillings per share. Home Africa lost 3.23%, and the BOC Kenya lost 2.98%, whereas the Scan Group at least lost 2.44%. On the movement side, Safaricom came back on top of the movers with a 15.8 million shares volume traded, and the Cooperative Bank of Kenya added at least 3.56 million shares trading, and Kenya Reinsurance Corporation about 1.32 million shares. Regarding the performance of the all-share index, consequent of the pretty better performance of the 52 stocks that participated in trade, there was no change in the all-share index, and it remained stagnant at exactly 99.33 points. And that's the performance, my friend, from the Nairobi Securities Exchange. We are vying for the integration of the capital markets, and of course, we are putting the capital markets authorities within East African region to a task to see that we integrate our market. I hope you be part of that drive to push integration. Integration will help us to diversify our products, to diversify our portfolio. For example, take a look at our neighbors in Kenya. They have at least over about 6 million investors. And here in Uganda, we're just short of about 60,000 investors, right? So you can imagine the contrast over about, maybe 100 times more. And that is, of course, creating a little bit of disparity in our trade, in our gains as a region. And we are vying for the integration of the capital markets to also ease access. We want a point in time to reach when we have farmers, when we have businessmen in Chukwu being able to access the Nairobi market, being able to trade with different equities on the Tanzanian exchange, or the Dar es Salaam Stock Exchange, or the Rwanda Stock Exchange, so that we see the markets grow in size, but also in value that is added to the shareholders or the investors therein. That's it from us today. Thank you so much once again for tuning in. If you missed anything, you can go back to our YouTube channel and you can be able to check out the content on our YouTube channel. That's at Smart24 TV Live. You can also go to our Twitter if you have any feedback at Smart24 TV Now, and get that feedback through. But of course, before we leave, I want to remind you about Altex East Africa, a trade platform. And this is for those of you interested in fixed income securities. Fixed income securities are treasury bonds and treasury bills. But in Altex, we focus on the longer term, that is the fixed income treasury bonds. These are assets that will bring you value in the shortest time possible, but also with Altex East Africa, we are bringing them even closer to you. Now you can grab your phone, dial *292# and follow the prompts. You do so, you learn more about the products, you buy and sell, and you can be able to, of course, register with Altex East Africa. Altex is a registered company and licensed by the Capital Market Authority of Uganda. And with as little as 15,000, you can now start your journey of investment with Altex East Africa. The doors open at 8 a.m. and close at 3 p.m. Altex East Africa, Zabu, my money, my future. You can do something new. And there you have it, my friend. Tomorrow is a Thursday. I hope you will stick around. There's a lot more business coming your way. This is Smart24 TV, and we say we drive your business. Stay tuned. See you tomorrow. Have a good day.
Smart 24.